All right. Thanks for taking the time to do this interview,
Sure.
and I appreciate you being able to share. If you want to start with your name and your occupation and just some basic stuff.
All right. My name is Nick Beatles or Nicholas A. Beatles. I'm a professor at GC&SU. Um, and, my nickname is Bo. My friends and family call me Bo.
All right, great. So, if you want to start out, I remember in class one time you were talking about your college years and
Mm-hmm.
how that was a big transition in your life. Would you be okay with talking about that?
Sure, sure. I went to the University of Georgia and started there. Gosh, a long time ago, and I wasn't really a very diligent student. I was actually at that time basically probably you would have called me a hippie. Okay, I had long hair. I was doing a lot of drugs at the time, and so I wasn't doing very well in school. And truth be known, I don't know if I told you. I don't know if I told you guys this, but I actually took one class. I had to take it 3 times. The first time I took it, I remember looking to a friend of mine, and being the sort of the hippie that I was, I guess I kind of said something like, "Well, Bob, I'm flunking this class, coming to class," and he said, "Well, yeah, so what?" And I said, "Well, I can flunk it not coming to class." And so, because my rationale was, why waste time? If I'm going to flunk it, why waste time going to class, right? So I never went back to the class. Sure enough, I flunked it, but I later, got around to managing to pass that class. But it led to eventually what happened was I felt like I needed, since I wasn't doing well in school, I needed to figure out what I needed to do. And so I talked to my family and said, look, I think the way I thought about it back then was I need to get my head together. You know what I mean? You get my head. And so I quit school. I wound up in Hickory, North Carolina, and I worked at the Coca-Cola bottling company, where I drove a Coca-Cola truck and I delivered Coca-Colas during that period of time. I was basically out of school for about a year, and during that time, I let me back up a little bit. One of the things that doing drugs did for me, I did a lot of psychedelic drugs, LSD, psilocybin, stuff like that. And hopefully, not a whole lot of people hear this recording. The interesting thing about those drugs, for me anyway, was that they made me consider that if a drug could make me perceive something that I didn't ordinarily perceive, then maybe there's a reality out there that is real that I just don't perceive in my normal, state of affairs. Maybe there's something else out there. So it made me aware that, up to that time I'd been an atheist. I thought, okay, there's, if I can't see it, touch it, it's not real. So there's not anything out there beyond this reality. But then when you do something that makes you sort of, when you do psilocybin or LSD or something like that, you can actually see sounds. Okay, so you see music in your head and out here, And so my thought was, well, there might be something, and I just don't have the quote unquote organ of perception to be able to perceive it. Okay, so during that year, and actually even previous to that year, while I was working for Coke, maybe a little over a year, I started just researching all kinds of religions. Okay, I thought I knew what Christianity was, but I mean, I didn't, but I thought I did because I'd been to church at least a few times. My parents, we weren't really involved in the church. And so I started investigating basically every kind of religion that you could find: Hinduism, Muslims, Buddhism, Baba Ram Das, he wrote the book Be Here Now, all of these things. I just started going through them. And then when I was doing that, I thought, okay, well, here's all these commonalities across these religions. You don't kill people, or whatever, or you be good to people. And I was trying to go, okay, well, what is it? Or, good deeds get rewarded, bad deeds get punished, that. And so I started trying to put together sort of, I thought, well, if all of these religions, because that's what I was getting to, is that they've all got to be correct, right? I don't want any one of them to be wrong, but certain religions do have exclusive truth claims, like, Judaism, the Muslim religion, the Christians, those all have specific truth claims. But other religions, some of them don't. They incorporate, other ideas. The Romans were okay with a pantheon of gods. They just did. The problem for the Christians at that time were they wouldn't worship Caesar. That was their real, that was the real big hang-up that caused them to kill Christians. So there were exclusive truth claims, but I was abandoning that, saying that there's no such thing as exclusive truth claims. And so I started thinking, okay, I've got to. I'm going to put together my own religion, basically, okay? So I had the idea, I'll go read all these religions, and then I'll see what I like about each one, and then I'll make up my own. And, it got to be a little bit ridiculous. I mean, I went so far, I think I told you at the beginning of this, my nickname was Bo, right? So I thought, well, why not? If all religions are okay, I'll make up my own, and I'll call it Boism. Okay, and then what I'll do is the things that I like to do, these drugs or whatever, that'll be sacraments, and this stuff over here that I don't like to do, that'll be sin. And then I'll convince people to follow me, and we'll call them Boites, and they can give me money, and I could have my own religion, and it would, after all, be named after me because I come up with it. So, and then, that seemed a little bit, as I thought about it, I thought, well, that's kind of ridiculous. Maybe I ought to investigate one of these religions that have absolute truth claims. Well, I kind of thought about the Muslims, and I thought about Judaism, but I thought maybe I should look at Christianity and see what that's all about. Because one of the things that happened, this is what really probably made me think about Christianity. I skipped over this, is when I went to work for that Coca-Cola company, what I did was I substituted for the drivers. So I would learn a driver's route, and I'd ride with him for a couple of weeks. Then when we went on vacation, I'd run his route, okay? So out of about 12 drivers, I think maybe 10 of them were Christians. And so they were sharing with me, and it became clear that I didn't really know what Christianity was, at least what they said Christianity was, okay? With the exclusive truth claim of that, Jesus is I am the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father except by me, kind of thing. And I had all these, I still had questions, but I can still remember one guy I really would remember was sitting in the truck with him, and I think I asked him I know I asked him this question. I said, well, what about people who haven't heard? This classic question, well, if you haven't heard about Jesus, then you haven't had a chance to believe, and so therefore God's unfair and all this kind of thing, and that was a hang up for me. And so I looked at him, he was a country guy, and I said, well, what about those who haven't heard? And he looked at me and just right dead in my eyes, man. And he was this, young guy, skinny guy, sitting over there, and he goes, see, wait, he said, I'll have, he goes, I don't know about them that haven't heard. You can let God take care of them. But I can tell you one thing, you've heard. And if you don't repent, you're going to hell. Man, it was like, I kind of leaned back like that, and I was like, man, this guy really believes it. It struck me that he believed it, and I'd ask that question to people, and people would try to explain it and do all this kind of stuff. And he kind of nailed it. And that made me think. In fact, that was probably the thing that led me to go, okay, well, I need to go buy a Bible and read it. And so I went to a Christian bookstore, because I thought that's the only place you get Bibles, I guess, in town. And I was standing in front of the Bible section, and I'm trying to see what, I didn't know anything about, this Bible, that Bible, whatever, And so it was obvious that I didn't know anything. And this guy from the counter came over, and he said, well, can I help you? And I said, well, I'm looking to buy a Bible. And so he goes over there, and he says, why don't you get this one? And I can still remember it was called the Soul Winner's New Testament, So I got that thing, and I think he suggested that I should read the book of John. And I said, okay, but I don't know if I started with John. I think I might have started with the first gospel, Matthew or whatever. And so I started there, and then started reading and thought about it, and considered it. And I read through it, and I got to John chapter 5, and there's a place in there where Jesus is talking to the Pharisees. I hope this is okay with me talking about all this stuff. I'm not trying to convert you or anything. I'm just
absolutely.
Yeah. But I got to the place where he's talking to the Pharisees, and he says to the Pharisees, let me think, he says, you search the scriptures. Because while I was reading, I was trying to integrate the New Testament with these other religions that I've read. And I'm saying, okay, this principle, that principle, whatever. And so still integrating, but then I get to John chapter 5, and he says, to the Pharisees, he says, you search the scriptures because in them you think you found eternal life, but they are which testify of me. And I realized that's what I was doing. I was searching the scriptures and going, okay, let me make it fit so that I can have eternal life, right? And if it, all these things will fit, I'll be okay in the afterlife, because I've been convinced that there's some other kind of spiritual thing going on. And I went, well, that's me. That's what I'm doing. And it sort of, I guess, the word be convicted me or whatever. And so I said, and then I read a little bit further on. He goes, and this is paraphrase. He says, you will honor somebody else when they come in their own name, but I come in my Father's name, and you won't honor me. And that struck me because I thought, here's Jesus. He's talking about his Father. He's come in humility. He's doing this. This is a different kind of person. And so that's really struck me. And it wasn't too long after that. I can remember the year. It was in 1976. It wasn't too long after that when I became convinced of the truth claims of who Jesus was. And basically, I just said, okay, I get it. I believe that I'm a sinner. You're not. You died for me. And, that's the essence of becoming a Christian. And so I became a Christian. And at that point, it sort of changed everything that I was doing. And I began to change my behavior with regard to participation in drugs, what I did. Started getting more serious about exercise and things like that, and thought, I now have a purpose. And so I wanted to go back to school. And so I went back to my father and said, hey, Dad, I'll be a good boy. He said, okay, if I come back, I'll live at home, I'll save money, I'll get a job, I'll go to school. And so he said, okay. And as soon as that fall, the next fall, the first fall I could do it, I came home and went back to school, and then studied really hard because I'd done so poorly before that I wanted to show to my parents that there had been a change. And so that's really what I did. And I wound up doing really well in school for the last 2.5 years that I had. And that wound up helping me later on. I didn't know I was going to do this, but later on when I decided to go to grad school, that enabled me to go to grad school. So that's how I wound up, Oh, one other thing I did that was unique, probably. Well, I know it would be unique. You probably find this kind of weird, actually. When I came back, and keep in mind, this is before the internet. This is before, and TV went off at 12 o'clock at night, okay? And it came back on like at 6 o'clock in the morning. They play the national anthem and it'd go on. I decided I was going to get up at like 4 a.m. in the morning. And then that's when I would study and get exercise and spend some time in the Bible, pray, that kind of thing. And the key to getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I will tell you, is going to bed at 8 o'clock at night, okay? So you have to go to bed early if you're going to get up early. And I had another rationale for that, was it actually kept me out of, a lot of drugs are done at night. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, that kept me away from the people who wanted to do those things. and gave me opportunity to work on myself. So I started going to bed at 8 o'clock at night and getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'll guarantee you, particularly the first morning you get up at 4 and you look around and go, well, what am I going to do with myself? You better do something good for yourself, or you should just go back to sleep. So that's what I did, and it, got a job. I had a couple of jobs, drove a YMCA bus because I had the Class 3 license from working for Coca-Cola, and that's basically how I got through my undergraduate. A little bit different, but that's why it helps me to understand kids who young people who are in college and they're struggling. Maybe they're partying too much or doing the wrong kind of stuff. Heck, man, I understand it. I wasn't a good guy. I was not a good guy when I was in college. And in my senior year in high school, I was not a good guy. I'm not a good guy now, really, if you want to know the truth. But I mean, it was over. And now you probably, people look at me and say, you're not too bad. No, I know myself. I am bad. But back then, it was like, you didn't have to really know me to know I wasn't a good guy.
Yeah. So how did you decide to go back to the grad program? Like, when did you make that decision?
Well, I wound up, I worked and, whatever, and I wound up going and doing a master's degree in economics, and actually didn't finish the thesis, but I did all the coursework. And while doing that, I thought, you know what, I think I want to go to seminary. And this was a little while later, but at some point we wound up, I was actually, the reason I worked for Coke was because it was, the bottling franchise was a sort of a family business. And so I had gone back and I went back and worked for them, management trainee and so forth. And so at some point, I think it was like 89, we sold the business. We sold the franchise, which gave me an income for a while. And I could go back to school, And so I thought, I'll go to seminary. And so I started part-time at this one seminary where I was living at the time in Columbia, South Carolina. And I was going to go to Boston to go to Gordon Conwell Seminary in Boston. I had a job offer up there at Park Street Church as well. But when I was going, this seminary was Columbia Biblical Seminary in Columbia, South Carolina, and I liked it. And it was, there were certain professors that I really particularly liked. And I went there part-time, and then I just didn't go up to Boston. I just stayed there. It was cheaper. Living expenses were lower. It turned out to be a good decision in some other ways, not the least of which being that I met my wife while I was there, okay? And then I graduated from seminary. I then went pastored a church for about 3 years, had a child, and was thinking, okay, I had originally, and by the way, I'd originally gone to seminary because I thought I wanted to be a seminary professor. And so, so I did, but then I thought, well, I need some pastoral experience if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to teach people in seminary. And while being a pastor, I've met a few of my friends who had actually in the pastoral ministry had THDs and PhDs, and they had actually done everything that you needed to do to be a seminary professor, but there weren't that many jobs in seminaries for teaching, and the pay wasn't very good. And here I have a wife and I have a child, and I thought, I want to teach. So, I like teaching. I figured out I was a teacher. In fact, you may find this to be really weird, but you don't know this yet, but I keep 3 tennis balls over here to remind me that I'm a teacher. And you go, well, why does that do that? Well, I can teach anybody how to juggle.
I think so.
Yeah, I can. After the interview or whatever, I'll teach you how to juggle. Okay. But this reminds me that this is what I am. It's not just what I do. There are a lot of people who teach who can't teach. They're not really teachers. They just did it because they were an expert in their field or whatever.
God's grace, if you will. I'm a quote unquote an expert in my field, but I also this is what I am, and this reminds me of it. So, and we'll see what happens with you. Okay,
Yes.
I think I can. Okay, it's that's just the way I'm wired. So, but these guys didn't have jobs, and they were pastors and so forth, and so I thought, well, what can I do that would enable me to be a teacher that but yet still remain faithful, so to speak, to my faith. And I thought, well, I was good at business. I was good in business school. I was good at business. My mind's really wired for that, math, that kind of thing. And so I thought, what I can do. And well, the other thing I found out was there was a shortage of business professors as well. And so I thought, well, I'll go and I'll get a business degree because that's what I can do. I think I'm okay. I'm good at that. And then I can go teach at my denominational seminary, which was Covenant College at the time. So I'm a Presbyterian. And so I went back to school and took classes part-time at the University of South Carolina to see if I had the intellect to actually be able to do it, take some stat classes and stuff like that. It turns out, yeah. And then I went and I applied to various schools. Fortunately, I did real well on the GMAT, and thanks to God for that. And I just applied to various schools, and then this will sound like I applied to schools that I thought would have something, programs that I might be interested in with regard to business. I didn't want to do economics, but I wanted to do management because that also fit with how you lead churches and things like that, because you got to manage a church, and it's a volunteer organization and all that kind of thing. I thought that would fit with me as well. And at the time, I wanted to put together the ideas of organizational behavior and economics. And so I went and applied to various schools that would have a program. I consulted with some guys at the University of South Carolina, talked to them about it, and they recommended some programs, and I applied, and fortunately got into all the ones that I wanted to go to, and then just picked the one that would give me the most money. And so that was an issue, because if you go to seminary, you have to pay. If I had done a PhD, I would have had to pay for those courses, and I had to would have had to work and all that other kind of stuff. But when I went to business school, the tuition was free because they gave me a scholarship. And I had a fellowship and a graduate assistantship and those kinds of things. So all my tuition was free. I actually had supplemental money. I had money from the Coca-Cola company as well. And so we were able to live on my income, and I was able to get through my PhD program, based on the assistantship and the other kinds of things. So that's how I went back to school.
So you said earlier that you like to be a teacher, right? You just felt like that was your thing. What do you think it means to be a teacher, and why do you think that you are?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure in some ways. I mean, I think part of being a teacher is wanting to help people. And I think I've always enjoyed helping people. I mean, I know a lot about computers and stuff. I've been in a place and somebody's trying to buy a computer, they're thinking about something, and I know I've tried to help them. I've coached tennis. I was a tennis player, and a serious tennis player, and so I used to give tennis lessons and things like that. My father actually was a teacher. He was a professor at University of Georgia, and weirdly enough, my brother was an engineering professor. At one time, my father and my brother and I were all full professors in the Georgia system. And then my father retired. Now my brother's retired. But what does it mean to be a teacher? I think it is fundamentally helping people, but there's some other elements to it as well. I think there's the joy of discovery and learning, and being able to learn something in such a way that you can then express it to someone else so that they too can comprehend it. And not everybody has the ability to do that, because people learn things different ways. but I had learned how to. I can break when I learn something, I break it down, and I break it down in ways that can help people remember it and understand it, and then I can sort of reverse engineer that when I explain it, and so and people get it. I mean, I love seeing somebody discover the joy of learning. That's you've been in my class, okay? So you know that I ask a lot of questions, right? Well, the reason I ask questions is because my experience is that people tend to remember something that they have discovered on their own longer than they will remember what I tell them. If I can enable you to discover something, you will remember it, okay? And not only that, but if I can get you to discover something and you put two things together that you hadn't put together before, that's exciting for the person who's learning. And so when that happens, then the person who is learning experiences the joy of what it means to learn. And so, I think a lot of times when people are teaching, they just put out facts. And the facts are not fun necessarily. Just memorizing facts are not fun. But gaining insight is fun. I think another element of being a good teacher is the idea of enjoying you yourself enjoy learning and discovering things. So if I can get that to people, and then that helps them do everything, because I think people are going to have to be lifelong learners. You're going to do more than one job through your career. Likely, you'll be in different places, and so you're going to have to learn new things. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, you
Okay.
did.
Okay.
On top of that, just piggybacking off of something or not piggybacking, but in class, when we have the articles, I'm assuming that's part of you want us to learn it and then come back and then talk about it, and that's why when people don't read it, you want them to go outside so that they don't just hear it from everybody else; they can actually figure it out themselves.
That's exactly right. I want them to discover it, and then I want them to also, if they go, and there's a lesson for that too. See. I'm trying to teach, when I'm teaching class, I'm not just teaching the content of the class, but in terms of doing that, I want people to learn if they will come prepared, okay, then they're way ahead of most people. I can't tell you how many meetings I've shown up to, business meetings, whatever, and faculty meetings, the people are not prepared. They haven't done the work that they should have done before they got to the meeting. And so what I want you guys to learn is if you'll come prepared, then everything's, good. And that it's not a big deal if let's just say you forgot the reading or you didn't remember something. Okay, so what? Ain't no big deal, right? If you do that on a consistent basis, it becomes a big deal.
Right.
So what I'm trying to do is get you guys to get the habit of being prepared, not worrying about failing, get over your fear of failure, and go ahead and take some risks. I mean, even some of the readings, I don't know if you recall, they had to do, well, I've tried to create what one of the readings calls a psychologically safe environment. I mean, I'm not mean to anybody in there. Have I been mean to anybody?
No, you always put emphasis on the fact that you're not trying to be mean. You just want them to read it and understand.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a challenging. Well, like in the psychological safety article, right? You're safe, but you're not necessarily comfortable, and that's what I'm trying to create.
Right. And then, what qualities do you think a teacher, or not necessarily needs, but do you think there are qualities that make somebody better than others that can't necessarily be taught, that you need to just have?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the problem is I don't know as I've identified. It's a good question, okay, but I'm not sure I can identify the qualities, because like my brother is a good teacher, okay, and I was instrumental in developing the web MBA that we have. I mean, they knew I was a sort of a technical kind of guy when I came in here, and so they asked me to help do the web MBA, and quote unquote, I had a good reputation as in teaching organizational behavior at a graduate level and so forth. And so, I helped do that. But then, it's sort of like my thought was, the instrument doesn't really matter. You know, there's all this focus on the computer and all this other kind of stuff. You know, I can teach. If you gave me a stick and dirt, I can teach. Okay? And the computer's just a sophisticated stick and dirt. And you know, I know how to, I know what you're supposed to do within that environment. I didn't not learn what constitutes good online courses. I mean, I took the approach of learning about it as well. But you know, there's some folks who can learn about something and then just somehow they just can't communicate. And there's some people who can study teaching. There's a lot of stuff I do that I couldn't put together in a portfolio and show that that constitutes good teaching. Okay, you know, you know, this assignment, then we did this and that and that. It's but I think if you were to poll my students, I hesitate. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I mean, if you were to, I think they would, for the most part, they tend to indicate that I'm an effective teacher. Okay, on my student evaluations and. Even I'll rate my professor, although some people think I'm a jerk, you know, which I am. You know, so I don't know. I'm not sure you can. I think you can. You know, when we study leadership, I showed you that you got this shell of potential of being a leader, right? And you
bigger potential.
Yeah. And so I think everybody's sort of got a shell of potential in terms of teaching, and sometimes some people have a bigger shell. The issue is, do you make, if you're going to be a teacher, do you make the most of what you have? Problematically, there's some people who are doing it because it's not because they love it. I think that's one of the things, you need to love it. Mm-hmm. My youngest daughter is a teacher. And so that's kind of funny. I tried to persuade her not to do it. She's an English teacher in high school. And I tried to persuade her not to do it, but she's an English teacher, and she is a very good teacher. She knows how to do it. She just intuitively grasp it. And you know, it's like, you know, there's certain things that are going to limit you, you know, in terms of doing those kinds of things. But you know, interestingly enough, I took my father for a class. I had him, and he was a good teacher, and he was very tough. And my daughter has sat in on one of my classes before. And I've gotten feedback from. I got feedback from her on what I was doing. You know, it's kind of interesting. And we still, you know, it's a funny thing too. My brother and I still talk about teaching, even though he's retired, and we talk about that. And I have that commonality with my daughter, and I was able to have that commonality with my father. A little less so because he was, you know, in World War II generation. You know, they kind of like back. They don't talk. So, I don't know. I don't think I could. I'm not sure I could. I might be able to help somebody do what I do, and I have helped some people do what I do. But I think it's difficult. It would be difficult for me to teach somebody to do what I do in class. I mean, I'm going to ask you a question. Does it make sense about what I'm saying in terms of what I'm trying to accomplish in class? Is that happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is.
Okay. All right. Well, then that's an encouragement phrase. I'll take it.
So you said how that. Let me think. Sorry.
That's okay. You can ask me anything.
Yeah, you said you were talking about how some students need like a certain, like, do you think there's unteachable students is like what I was really trying to get to, because you said like you need to interact, right, and like you need to teach in accordance.
There are there's some unteachable students. You know, it depends upon, you know, if they react negatively to my personality or to my teaching style, you know, they just choose not to learn. There are unteachable students. And that's okay. I mean, they may need to find somebody else to teach them. And they're just, you know, it's like they're unteachable people. So, you know, part of college should be, in my opinion, is that, and it's not as much so as it used to be, is that it's sort of a proxy for, can you learn from anybody? All right, if you can do well in college by taking, you know, I don't know how many professors will you take in college?
A lot.
Yeah, a lot,
Yeah.
right? 30 professors, let's just say, or more. You take all of those people, and you can do well, in a course that you don't like with a professor that you don't like. Then when you get out in the workplace, you can perform well with a manager you don't like doing something you don't like. Okay?
Yeah.
So, so it's almost like you can be thrown into any condition with any type of a manager, and you can do well because you proved yourself in college to have done that. And so, yeah, they're unteachable students. And they're people who just maybe shouldn't be in college, and that's okay too. I have no, and there are people who just want to do something else other than college, and I don't have a problem with that, or they don't want to make a B or an A in my class. That's okay with me. I mean, I'm pretty understanding of people. I mean, people are very different. I mean, heck, man, I've had 4 children. I've probably taught, I don't know, I might have taught around 5,000 students in the state of Georgia alone. That's a lot. So I've been exposed to a lot of folks.
And then you said earlier, like, it depends on if they like you sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So this may be like an interesting question to you. Why do you think that some students may not like you specifically?
Well, I mean, I can be sarcastic for one thing, right? And they may not get it. Okay, I don't know if I said this in your class, but you can't. I come from a sarcastic family, and one of the things about that is that if you're sarcastic, okay, let me give you an example. I've got 2 brother-in-laws, okay?
Mm-hmm.
One of my brother-in-laws I know respects me, okay? And he's a highly accomplished individual. But because he respects me, he can be sarcastic with me, and it doesn't bother me because I know he's not saying something that he secretly believes to be true.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's negative about me. On the other hand, I've got another brother-in-law who does not respect me. Okay, he doesn't like me either. So when he's sarcastic, I don't like it because I think he's really trying to say something with the sarcasm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's trying to make a point, and so I don't trust him. And so the sarcasm actually it's not good. And so it's sometimes I think if a student doesn't trust me and they think I'm not out for their best interest, and I'm sarcastic, then that can cause a problem. That can make them dislike me, or they might not like my humor, or think that I think I'm smarter than I am, or whatever. I have no illusions about my brilliance or whatever. I'm not brilliant. It's that, or they think I'm a stuck up or whatever. That any number of those things can cause problems with students' perception of a faculty member. I mean, my thought of teaching, that maybe this would help with understanding what makes a good teacher, is I look at the challenge in a classroom is that I am a coach. Okay, teacher is a coach in a lot of ways, and I'm coaching you on how to grasp the material and getting you through that material, and so it's you and me against the material, right? That's the opponent. It would be the book, right? The material you've got to learn, and we're on the same team. If you misunderstand things and you think that it's me against you, and a lot of students, well, not a lot, but at least some, come to the experience of a classroom and they think it's the professor against the student and the student against the professor, then that creates a negative environment for learning. But if you guys will grasp the fact that it's not that way, it's you and me working together to get you to understand this material so you can perform well, and so hopefully it'll benefit your life later on, that's a different perspective. So, there are times when I've had students, they think it's me against them. And that can cause a problem and they don't want to learn. Or if they think I've been unfair. And I really try to be as fair as I possibly can. But, upon occasion, I've had misunderstandings with a student where they thought I was unfair. But I've also, to a lot of their credit, many of the students will come back later on and go, well, you know what, I've had several of them come back to, you were fair, whatever. And apologize maybe for their response. And if I'm out of line, I'll apologize. I've been out of line before.
I think it takes a big person to apologize too for that. Like a lot of like maturity. It's an interesting.
Well, I'm an old fart.
Well, even for the younger people too, like especially.
It does. Yeah, I mean, I had a sort of misunderstanding. Well, not a misunderstanding with a student who was rude here just this semester, and I sort of confronted them on it. They were, in my office, and they were being rude, and I wound up telling them that they were being rude. And most professors won't do that, And so, but to their credit, because they thought I was being unfair, and they thought I was being unfair in terms of test question, and they were rude about it and everything, and I kind of stopped them in that course, and expressed to them that they were being rude and disrespectful or whatever, and to their and then I was a little bit harsh when I did it, tone of voice and so forth, and so I said, look, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that or said it in that way, and I said, forgive me, but hey, you were being, disrespectful when you were asking these questions. And to that young man's credit, he came to me that was on a Wednesday, he came to me on the following Monday and apologized and said, you know what, you're right, I was being disrespectful. And, and I told him, thank you. And I said, I forgive you, whatever. And I told him, and I asked him again, I said, look, hey, forgive me, I had a bad tone with you because I reacted to you. And he did, and we shook, and, we're good to go. And I've spent a fair amount of time outside of class with him.
Yeah. Do you think relationships with the students beyond just like in the classroom is important? Like having, like knowing some of them, like, I guess not like super personally, but I guess like interactions outside of the classroom, kind of like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things I do is I require everybody to come and visit me in the office, and that's where we talk some, and so it's like I get to know you guys, what your struggles are. It helps me understand what's going on, and you guys get to know me a little bit better. I mean, I am actually this weekend performing the wedding of a former student of mine.
Wow.
So, and I've been asked to do some time ago. I've done that as well, and I've had students that I've had students in my home significantly. I've had I think I might have told you about that picture back there where a student went off and he wound up being a pararescue guy, and then and we took that picture, and then after he'd gotten out of school, I'd spent a lot of time with him outside of class, and then he came back with that picture, with me. It was Breaking Bad, It was pretty funny. So, I think it's important to know students outside. I mean, it's sort of funny, I think sometimes students don't use professors as well as they should in the sense of talking to them, right? And, from a classroom perspective, sometimes I don't realize how I come across. I mean, on the inside, I feel like a teddy bear all the time, right? But I know sometimes I can come across maybe as a grizzly bear, right? This visage is not the friendliest visage on the face of the world. It kind of looks like what's the guy's name in Breaking Bad? I forgot. Heisenberg, right? Sometimes I look like Heisenberg, like say my name, So that's part of the thing, but I think if we get to know one another, it helps to create psychological safety. And the truth is, I'm on your side. I want you guys to do well. I mean, I don't know, but some students, man, they just think you're against them, but that's not the way it is. Most faculty that I know really want the students to do well. I mean, I think that's why we do this, really.
Yeah. It's an interesting take too. Like it's like a different perspective because like as a student, sometimes that's how it feels. Is like you're battling the the system, and you're just like, oh, I have to get a good grade, and like they're combating that. But it's like an interesting perspective that you're offering. So it's something to think about for sure for a lot of people. So on a lighter note to end, because you talked about the office and like how we come to visit. Can I ask about like music? Like, where did the passion for like the music come from? 'Cause I know you love music.
Well, I do love music, all kinds of music. It's funny because we didn't listen to music growing up, and when I was, as a kid. What ended up, and stereo equipment kind of thing. Um, one of the things I really liked doing when I was tripping would be to listen to music. And as I mentioned, psychedelic drugs can make you actually, it's called synesthesia, where you actually cross over your senses, where you can see sound. And it's an interesting thing. And it actually increases your perception of sound. And you hear more nuance in the instruments that are playing in any given song. Something's engineered well, you can hear all these things going on, and it separates, and it's really, really cool. And so I listened to all kinds of music back then, and then since then, there's been sort of this pursuit to achieve, I want to say, legitimately, the experience that I could achieve illegitimately by taking a drug. And so I pursued stereo equipment. And in the process of, doing that, I found other genres of music that I would like to listen to, because they were actually really beautiful pieces of interactions of instruments and or engineered really well. And so, and there's stereo equipment that will allow you to hear that. And so even within genres, there's music that's actually recorded well and music that's not recorded well. And so I really like stuff that's recorded well, and I like learning about it. And then I just like, I discovered that I like messing around with the bass and stuff like that, So if I were to, I wish I could be a studio musician rather than a professor. If I could be anything other than a professor, I would like to be a very accomplished studio musician, where everybody knew I was great at what I did, but not everybody necessarily knew who I was.
Mm-hmm. So another life,
yeah,
another reality.
Yeah. If I'm wrong about Christianity and I come back again, I hope it's as a musician.
All right, well, that'll do it for it. We meet the timestamp, so
okay.
I really appreciate your time.
Sure.
And
I'm sorry to, it's awkward in the sense to be talking about myself so much. It's like, oh man, it's like, well, I don't really like doing it, but I mean, you asked me to do this thing, so.
Yeah, you know what? It actually went fantastic. I thought. I mean, I didn't even have to ask some of the questions on here because we were just going, so it went really well.
Okay, cool.
All right, cool. Well, I appreciate your time.
Did you stop it yet?
Stop it.